The date today is Sunday, November 15th, 2015. The podcast is Real and the Field Goals Instant Reaction. The reaction is not positive to the Seahawks 39-32 loss to the Arizona Cardinals in what can only be called perhaps the biggest shit show of the last 3 years under Pete Carroll. I mean, the Seahawks have lost some games. They've been out of some games that they sort of scratched their way back into. They had a fourth quarter lead again in this game. But even if they had won, I think you would come away thinking, yeah, the Seahawks maybe they're not very good. They maybe I think that they're good, but they're definitely not great. And even if they had won, that probably would have held true that this is a team that will not have as easy of a time getting back to the Super Bowl, let alone the playoffs. I think I should have said that the other way around. The playoffs, let alone the Super Bowl. Keep the bigger thing, let alone. That's sort of it's like with Aaron Rodgers today when he was coming back. The Packers had really gotten their butts kicked, or at least they weren't playing very well against the Lions. They had a chance to win it, but that really would have shadowed the fact that they'd played really bad, and that a win doesn't change the fact that you can play bad. Uh, but there's no worries there because the Seahawks lost, so you can very much see how bad they played. 39-32. It's really hard. Danny, I guess, obviously I'm Kenneth Arthur, and Danny Kelly is the co-host here at fieldgoals.com. But Danny,
What's
uh,
happening?
the reactions are going to be negative, but as far as how the team is, the state of the team, and what you saw tonight, what is your overall reaction? How devastating is this loss for Seattle?
Well, I mean, obviously, you don't try not to make too many blanket judgments on a season based on one game, but this is kind of a continuing trend for the Seahawks in terms of how they play and what it means for the rest of the season. In terms of now they're 4-5, they have really put themselves up against the wall in terms of getting to the playoffs. They're almost surely not going to win the division this year. I think it's like a 2% chance now or something like that. And they just don't look good. I mean, like they gave up 30, whatever, what was it, 39 points at home, in prime time, which has basically been their bread and butter, scenario over the last couple of years when they've been really, really good. And they just they shit the bed in the first half, looked awful in the first half, managed to come back and get the lead and things were looking better. But, again, they gave up the game-winning touchdown pass to the tight end up the seam, like the same stuff that we've seen like way too many times this year. So it's discouraging, definitely. I think it's, kind of just tells you I don't think this team is anywhere near where they need to be in terms of the way that they're playing. I don't know if it's like a talent issue. I think this team is pretty good, like talent-wise, but yeah, they're just nowhere near where they need to be.
As far as the division goes, I think we just put that in our back pocket. Don't even think about it at this juncture. Don't even worry about whether or not what the Seahawks need to do to win the division. But they're 2 games out of the last wild card spot. I mean, with 7 games to go, the Atlanta Falcons being one of the teams that they would need to catch up to. The Falcons have lost 3 of the last 4 games. They've lost to the Saints. They've lost to the Bucks, and they've lost to the 49ers. So they've lost to some of the worst teams in the NFL. The Falcons are not a very good team either. So they're only 2 games behind that. And the teams that they're tied with, there isn't like another team sitting in the weeds there that's like the Seattle Seahawks. If the Seahawks manage to catch up and get into that wild card spot, we've seen a lot of teams get hot at the right time. The
Right.
2000 Packers, the 2011 Giants, the 2012 Ravens. These are all teams that weren't doing so good at this point in the season and then managed to go on to win the Super Bowl. So I
Very
think
true.
so I think that as far as the long term goes, or the right now, I think, and you still look at the teams that they've lost to, and other than the Rams, all of them very, very, very good teams, some of the best teams around. I think obviously the Packers have been exposed a little bit,
Hmm.
but yeah, the devastating-ish part is the Seahawks aren't that invincible at home anymore. They don't have the very good record on. They're like They've lost both of their Sunday night football games this season, so that there's not that invincibility either. It's just sort of made them look like a regular team. They're just a team that's somewhere in the middle of the pack. They're
Yep.
not a great team. But that's only hurts because they have been such a great team over the last couple of years.
Right.
And yeah, I would really like it if they could bounce back to get to 9-7 or something like that, 10-6. If only, when you look at the great teams like the Patriots, 15 straight seasons or whatever it is with a winning record that they clinched today. I mean, it would be nice to. You felt like the Seahawks were building that in 2012. It would be nice to keep that momentum going.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you bring up a lot of good points. They're definitely like not out of it, and it's not like necessarily the time to be like calling the season or anything. I think that Chris Collinsworth said it during the game. It's like if the Seahawks or maybe the Steelers or whoever ends up making the playoffs, they're like probably one of the teams that no one wants to play. Just because anything can happen once that comes. But
Right.
I just think with this loss, like it put them in really bad position to get there. They're basically it feels like we've said this like 3 times, but they like basically have to win out now, I think, to really give themselves a good chance.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. As far as what I guess, what were the things that really concerned you that you saw in the game specifically? Because they were number one in the NFL against number one receivers. Larry Fitzgerald, 10 catches for 130 yards. They were somewhere they were doing good against number two receivers. Michael Floyd, 7 catches for 113 yards
And a
2
touchdown.
touchdowns.
2 touchdowns, yeah.
The worst team against tight ends. They allowed that one to Jermaine Gresham. But it was especially disturbing. Just like they had that one, it was 3rd and 4 in the fourth quarter. If they stop the Cardinals, they're going to get the ball back down 3 points, and they give up a catch to Jaron Brown. I mean, it was just Jaron Brown. Kerry Williams couldn't cover Jaron Brown. So
Right.
as far as the way they're doing pass defense, what are you seeing that's not as good as it used to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously Richard Sherman didn't have a great game today either. I think they lost some talent when Maxwell went to Philly. Obviously, I think he's a better corner than Kerry Williams. I think Kerry Williams has been exposed, over the last few weeks, and that's rough because their scheme is pretty dependent on guys really executing what they need to do and executing it well. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tough to know exactly what the problem is. Obviously, I think the Cardinals are really just a really good passing team, and they've done this to a lot of teams over the season, and Seahawks definitely didn't play as well as they could or should. And it's crazy too because they got 2 big turnovers late in the game. Those are the kind of plays that typically would help the Seahawks win a game, and they still couldn't get it done. So I don't know. I don't have the answer. I'll have to take a look at it, obviously, but I just can't really figure out what they're doing wrong. I mean, like the whole tight end thing, like giving up the same seam route to tight ends 5 times this season. Why can't they figure this out? I don't know what's going on.
Russell Wilson, 14 of 32, 240 yards, a touchdown, an interception, a costly intentional grounding penalty there in the fourth quarter.
Also gave up a safety, probably really 2 safeties.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of mistakes in the first quarter. Russell Wilson, why does it seem like when he throws it to Jimmy Graham, he's especially unable to find the biggest guy on the field? It's like every single pass is it's almost like he's got double vision, and he's drunk when he sees Jimmy Graham because he's throwing it exactly 3 yards behind him every time. Doesn't it seem that way?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he did that with a lot of different receivers this week too. I don't know what's going on with that. It doesn't help that Jimmy Graham dropped a couple sure catches in this one, but so that's part of it. But he hasn't been accurate this year, and obviously 14 to 32. What is that, 40-something%? That's terrible. That's probably one of the worst games in his career in terms of completion percentage. And I mean, like we said, he had the pick, and then he had a really costly intentional grounding. He had a safety, and he had another play that should have been a safety. So, yeesh. I mean, that he was just not managing the game like he normally would or could, and it got to the point where he was even like hurting them, with his play. So,
something that we have to face as a reality is not something that's exclusive to Russell Wilson, and I don't want to be a super long-term bummer or anything either. It's enough to deal with this other loss, but when you look at the history of a lot of quarterbacks, a lot of them do peak early statistically. If you look at Dan Marino, I think some of the guys that Russell Wilson's been competing with for, first 3 year records, guys like Dan Marino and Kurt Warner, they were impossible to stop in the beginning of their careers, and then really hit some lulls, and were never quite the same. I think that there could be a chance that. Statistically, we've seen the best of Russell Wilson. There's also the chance that we haven't seen as much as he can do. I think he's going to be effective for a long time no matter what, but it may be different kinds of effective because, absolutely there were some really boneheaded throws in this game, inability to escape things that he thinks he can escape. There has to be some sort of reality check there for Wilson because I really feel like he is giving up too soon and going down, and at the same time, he makes those plays that you're like, holy shit, the only Russell Wilson can do that, and it's great and all. So you get the good with the bad, I guess.
Yeah.
Just for your own health and for those that are listening, Danny, I want you to share a happy memory from your life.
Well, just in terms of the Seahawks, let's just remember, I was tweeting about this on right after the game. It's like in the NFL, success and glory is definitely fleeting, So I think even just the memory of winning the Super Bowl and having the Super Bowl parade in Seattle, you should definitely continue to appreciate that because, if you look around at some of the mismanaged teams in the NFL and just continue. Just shit shows around the NFL, that kind of puts it in perspective. The Seahawks are still a very talented team, like we talked about earlier. There's still a team that can contend this year. So, but again, it's even if they end up, going in the wrong direction this year, having that, having the experience of the last two seasons, it's a great thing. So just remember that. And it's really, really freaking hard to maintain high level success in this league. No one does it. There's very few dynasties. So,
if you really take a look at this season and you compare this season to the last three seasons, then even then, but if you compare this season to 2013, it's going to be disappointing.
Yeah.
But, compare it to 2011 or 2010 or 2009 or 2008 or 2007.
Right. Exactly.
Or most of the 90s and lots of the 80s and all of the 70s.
Exactly.
A team that's still in playoff. They're still a good team. This is a team that had a fourth quarter lead. They've had the lead in 57 straight football games.
Yeah, how much did they lose by again today? Was it 10?
It was by 7.
7. Yeah, it's you lose by 7 points. It's think about the teams that got their asses kicked just today.
Fine.
You're still getting a quality football. This game is probably not a very good thing to say that, but you're still getting week in and week out a team that competes with every team in the NFL.
Right. The Cardinals, the team that just kicked our asses, the Cardinals lost by 12 to the Steelers.
Right. Yeah, it's all about perspective to me. Honestly, this game was really, really frustrating, but when you keep in mind that, this team has been consistently competitive in every single game going back 3-4 years now, you have to appreciate that. They're not getting their asses kicked. They're not total dysfunction. They're not the front office isn't fighting with the coaching staff and blah, blah, blah. There's definitely, it's silver linings, obviously. And you don't like talking about that stuff right after you lost. But I think honestly, it's important to keep that perspective.
Yeah. Well, the Broncos, if you look at the team like the Broncos, they start 7-0. I wonder how much if the Broncos fans are panicking more than the Seahawks fans, knowing that they had a 7-0 start and then really they're at a crossroads of whether or not they have to bench Peyton Manning, who they expected to be the guy that was going to be their leader into the season and through the playoffs. And really, they don't even know. He's got 17 interceptions in 9 games.
That's
So,
crazy. Yeah, that's crazy.
there are teams that maybe feel just as hopeless and you can think about it and think, yeah, the Seahawks they've played a lot of good teams, and they're just not one of the great teams right now. So,
Yeah.
otherwise they would have a better record. If the Seahawks were like 8-1 right now, they would be one hell of an 8-1 team. That would be they would have beaten some of the best teams in the NFL. It just so happens that they don't seem to look like one of the best teams in the NFL right now. But we've also seen how that those things can change in the middle of a season. Players can start to play like you expect. Coaches can maybe tighten up and get things more fine-tuned to what they were looking for. You can look at the Carolina Panthers, who were 3-8-1
Yep.
last season,
Yep.
and have won
13
straight games.
Yep.
So,
I mean, hey, the Seahawks
think
could
about
still
that.
win 11 games this year, and we could have a totally different tune by the end of the season. You never know. Based on
Absolutely.
the way that they played today, it's very frustrating, and this was like 14 penalties, and Russell Wilson looked bad, and like Jimmy Graham had drops and all this. There's a lot of crappy stuff from this game, but that doesn't define the whole rest of the season, and that's not like a cliche. It really, like, there's 7 more games to play, and they have a chance to turn it around. So, I mean,
well, this week they've got the 49ers, so a home win over the 49ers always will seem to feel like a good remedy. Then
that
they'll
won't
be
hurt.
5-5. Yeah, if they can do what they're expected to do, beat the Niners, go to 5-5, then they've got home against the Steelers. We'll see what Ben Roethlisberger's health status is over the next 2 weeks. But if don't be too bummed. You probably have bigger things in your life that are going to cause you a lot more stress and be a lot more difficult than your favorite football team being 4-5. I mean, you probably have to worry about paying your bills, losing your job, getting a divorce, meeting the love of your life, having a kid. I mean,
God.
I would rather the Seahawks lose than have a kid right now. I can't handle a kid. I'm way too responsible for that. What if I got someone pregnant? That would be much worse.
Oof,
This
shit just got real, Kenny.
It is getting real. And speaking of real in the
In
film
the
goals.
field goals. Oh, film goals, yes.
Really quick episode of Real in the Film Goals. I saw the movie Dope yesterday. Danny, have you heard of Dope?
I have heard of it. I have not seen it.
People were saying, "Oh, this is really good." I was like, I don't know. Okay, it's great. Dope. Lots of funny stuff. Lots of action. Lots of cool style. Lots of rap. Some nudity. Some drugs. Some music. It's got it all.
I watched.
How do you feel, Dan?
I went.
Oh, what did
I
you
went.
watch?
I went and watched the James Bond movie.
Spectre.
Yes, Spectre. I thought it was pretty good. I thought Sam Mendes was the director of it, and there was a scene at the beginning where it starts out where it's, I don't know how long, like 10 straight minutes of one continuous shot where a whole bunch of crazy shit happens. So I thought that was pretty cool. There was a lot of really classic James Bond, like GQ, like ads or whatever, where they just like have him get all dressed up and go to these exotic places. But I guess that's kind of par for the course for James Bond. So there was some of that cliche stuff, but otherwise it was a pretty entertaining movie. It is what a Bond movie what you'd expect it to be.
And are you a Bond head?
Not a Bond head, but I generally enjoy them. I didn't actually finish the last one, so I had to look up the plot for that. But I don't know. I thought it was fun. It was a fun movie. You have to go in not really expecting like anything special.
So not special, not like a Casino Royale where
That
people
one
consider to be classic.
Yeah, that one I think was way better.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what I've heard from real Bond heads, people that are all about it, that Daniel Craig is the best Bond. And that's saying something, I think, because there's been many years of Bond. Are you a Craig head?
I like him. I like the new reboot of the franchise. I think it's grittier and more realistic. obviously no Bond movies are really like super realistic in terms of the crazy stuff that Bond does, but it's not like they're going to the moon and stuff like that anymore. I think it's more
It's,
gritty and based in reality. So I think that's cool.
it seems like everything that all the movies that franchises that get released now are more gritty and serious and darker. Because if it's like, look at Batman in the '80s compared to
Yeah,
Batman now.
yeah,
Look at the X-Men movies that came out, like the first couple X-Men movies compared to the way they do X-Men movies now. Look at all that stuff. Just anything. Superman with Christopher Reeve compared to the last Superman and all that kind of stuff. Everything's like, let's get this serious. Let's put a nice sepia tone on it or something, and let's like really get serious about it. Because yeah, when I think of Bond, I think if you think of like Pierce Brosnan or Roger Moore, it's all very cheeky. And
right.
now it's, yo, this is serious. We want Oscars and shit.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens next week on Real and the Film Goals. But that's the end of that. And then next week on Real and the Field Goals, we'll be talking 49ers and rebounding and updating Bruce Irvin, who has an MCL sprain.
Yeah. So hopefully that doesn't keep him out for too long. Could be worse.
I don't know the extent of an MCL sprain, but it's definitely better than the words tear or ACL.
I think that wasn't Cam's thing an MCL sprain in the Super Bowl. Obviously, it limited him, but he played. I could be wrong. I don't think an MCL sprain is season-ending. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that's the way they're talking about it. And It was nice to see Paul Richardson pulling a 40-yarder. It was not nice to see him
get injured on
maybe it was yeah, to get injured on the first play.
Yeah.
Got to stretch those out. But yeah, so we'll be talking about that and updating all that stuff this Thursday on Real in the Field Goals. So subscribe on iTunes and you'll get all that, plus the Instant Reaction podcast, which hopefully will have some more finer tunes to be singing in the future after the 49ers game next week. Anything else we need to tell them, Dan?
No, I think we covered it, man.
Life could be worse.
That is our motto.
Yeah, I mean, technically speaking, I don't know who's listening to this. Like, they could be going through a really tough time. They've just gotten diagnosed with something, lost their house, a flood. But then those people, if they're listening to this, and they were like hanging on to this win by the Seahawks, like this would be their one final hope of like feeling good about something today. I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah.